Night arrives not with a sound, but with a slowing. Your eyes grow heavy, your limbs warm and still. Somewhere in the hush of your bedroom, your body begins its descent. Not like falling, not exactly. More like sinking gradually into something gentle, soft-edged, and inevitable. The world around you fades, not all at once, but in layers. And as the world recedes, you barely notice that you are changing too. The descent into sleep is not a single moment. It is a slow unwinding of systems. A winding down of light and tension. Your breathing deepens. Your heart settles into a quieter rhythm. You may not notice these shifts, but they are there, like the way twilight tints the sky before true darkness arrives. Inside your brain, the chatter begins to slow. The mind that spun stories all day now softens its voice. Thoughts lose their sharp edges. Instead of forming neat lines and conclusions, they begin to curl and meander. You drift from logic to image, from memory to imagination, slipping between them like silk through fingers. One moment you're replaying something that happened today, and in the next, it's turning into something else, less precise, more dreamlike. Your body plays its part too. Tiny muscles in your eyes, your jaw, your fingers begin to relax. A neurotransmitter called GABA begins to spread, whispering its calming messages through your nervous system. GABA is the gatekeeper of stillness, easing excitability in your brain like a dimmer switch turned slowly down. As it moves through you, everything begins to soften, your movements, your senses, even your awareness. There is no single switch that turns sleep on. It's more like a series of lanterns being blown out one by one across the landscape of your mind. Some areas darken quickly, others linger in half-light. Sleep does not begin everywhere at once. It arrives in pieces. And even in that arrival, there's no announcement, no horn to blow. Just a gradual letting go. At the edge of sleep lies a state called hypnagogia, a liminal in-between. You may know it from those moments when your thoughts take on strange shapes, when faces blend or landscapes morph without reason. You are not awake, but not quite gone either. Your brain is still creating images, but without the constraints of logic. It is like dreaming with one foot still in the real world. In this space, time changes its texture. A minute might stretch or vanish. Your sense of self, the I that narrates your day, begins to dissolve. You're no longer holding your thoughts like objects. They drift on their own, weightless. A voice becomes a hum. A memory becomes a wave. This is not sleep yet, but the borderlands. The systems keeping you awake are slowly quieting. One by one, they yield. Your reticular activating system, a network that keeps you alert during the day, grows dim. It is no longer scanning for threats or novelty. It has ceded control to other circuits now, circuits built for rest, for healing, for drifting far away. Your brain waves reflect this shift too. During the day, your brain hums in fast beta waves like rapid sparks across a wire. But as you drift into rest, they begin to slow into alpha and theta waves, gentler, smoother, rolling patterns that mirror your slowing breath. Scientists can see this change on an EEG like a sky turning from storm to stillness. And yet, even with all this unfolding, you do not remember it. You never do. The irony is tender. You are conscious right up until you aren't. You are there until you are not. And the bridge between these two states, the gentle descent, vanishes behind you. Every night, this moment slips through your fingers like water. This soft unraveling has purpose. Your body is preparing for repair, your brain for cleansing. In sleep, the glymphatic system, a kind of nighttime housekeeping crew, will rinse toxins from your brain's delicate tissues. Neurons will downscale, recalibrate, and store what needs keeping. Muscles will rebuild. Hormones will balance. All this begins the moment you surrender. But the surrender itself is always hidden from you. There is a reason for this, rooted in biology. To remember a moment, your brain must process it, must label it as meaningful, must give it shape and place. But the process of falling asleep is marked by a diminishing of those very systems. The hippocampus, responsible for forming new memories, grows quiet. The prefrontal cortex, your inner narrator, begins to hush. You lose the tools needed to remember the moment you lose them. And so, you pass through the veil unaware, like slipping through a door that closes behind you without a sound. There is comfort in this forgetting. You are not meant to guard the gates of sleep. You are meant to drift, to trust that your body knows the way even when you do not, to surrender to something larger, quieter, more essential. And so you do. Each night, you walk toward a sea without realizing it. And every night, the tide receives you. The descent is both a return and a release. Your ancestors, thousands of generations back, fell asleep under stars and firelight. They too felt this fading, this mysterious passage. The biology that carried them into sleep lives on in you, unchanged. You are not separate from them. You are not separate from the rhythm of life itself, pulsing between waking and rest. There is a certain holiness in that, the way your body knows when it is time to let go. And so, as your breath slows and your thoughts begin to blur, you don't resist. You don't even notice. You yield to something old and kind and hidden. What happens next is no longer under your conscious watch. You are slipping further now. The gate has not yet opened, but it draws near. Something deep in your brain is waiting. A quiet sentinel. A keeper of thresholds. And soon it will rise to meet you. Sleep does not arrive all at once. Before it can wash over you, something must first be let go. That something is the world itself, its lights, its sounds, its constant calling. And deep within your brain, a gatekeeper watches over that boundary. You don't feel it move. You don't hear it click. But there is a threshold you pass each night, and the thalamus holds the key. Nestled at the heart of your brain, the thalamus is like a great relay station, a conductor in a silent orchestra. During the day, it stays busy, taking in sights, sounds, smells, touch, filtering this flood of sensory data and sending it to the cortex where you make sense of it all. The thalamus decides what enters your awareness and what doesn't. It keeps you connected to the outer world. But when sleep begins to whisper through your body, the thalamus changes its tune. Its gates begin to close. It quiets the incoming messages. The chorus of the world, the ticking clock, the hum of the refrigerator, even the weight of the blanket against your skin fades, not because it disappears, but because the thalamus stops letting it in. It is like drawing the curtains in a sunlit room. The world outside is still there, but inside there is only quiet. This transition isn't sudden. The thalamus doesn't slam the door shut. Instead, it pulses slowly, rhythmically, reducing its activity in waves. The brain's electrical patterns shift as well. You move from fast, busy alpha waves to slower, rolling theta waves. These are the rhythms of letting go. The thalamus begins to synchronize with the reticular formation, a structure that manages arousal and wakefulness. Together, they step down your brain's activity, dimming consciousness like lights on a dimmer switch. Not off, just lower, slower, quieter. And yet, part of the magic lies in how this change feels like nothing at all. You don't notice the thalamus turning down the volume. You don't sense its gates closing, but it's happening quietly, precisely, each night as you drift. Without the thalamus, sleep would not hold. You would be endlessly interrupted, startled by the creak of a floorboard, the flicker of headlights, the whisper of wind. But with its gates closed, you are sealed inside a softer world. Think of the thalamus like the drawbridge to a castle. During the day, it stays down, allowing traffic in and out, ideas and sensations in action. But as night deepens, the bridge rises. Only a few signals are allowed through now, carefully chosen, like the sound of your name, or a baby's cry, or an urgent alarm. These still slip through because your body is still listening, even in rest. But everything else floats by unheard. This selective silence is what makes sleep possible. It is the absence of noise that lets your brain begin its deeper work. As the thalamus dims its relay, the cortex, the seat of thought and awareness, also starts to quiet. Freed from the constant influx of sensation, it is no longer tethered to the outside world. Instead, it turns inward. And in that inward turn, your thoughts become less structured, more fluid. You may drift into strange images, sounds that aren't real, flickers of dreams. These are called hypnagogic hallucinations, short, fleeting bits of perception born not from the outer world, but from your own brain unmoored. They are harmless, natural, common. They arise because your thalamus has stopped checking in. The gate is mostly closed, and now your brain is free to wander. There is something beautiful in this design. The thalamus does not shut down entirely, it changes roles. From being a messenger of the external world, it becomes a guardian of stillness, a protector of inner space. Scientists have studied the thalamus for decades, observing how it coordinates with other regions to create the very architecture of sleep, how it helps organize brain waves, stage transitions, and deeper rest. In particular, it works with the sleep spindle, a brief burst of rapid brainwave activity that appears during light sleep. These spindles, shaped like narrow streams of energy, help protect your sleep from disruption. They seem to reinforce the thalamus's gatekeeping role, shielding your mind from sudden awakenings. You can imagine sleep spindles as a gentle chorus of guards patrolling the edges of your mind, reinforcing the silence the thalamus maintains. Even as your body lies still, your brain continues to hum, selectively, methodically, quietly. The thalamus doesn't sleep in the way you do. It stays alert to what it should ignore. That paradox of being active in order to keep you unaware is one of the thalamus's quiet wonders. And yet, for all this complexity, for all its grace and precision, you never truly know when it happens. You cannot point to the exact second when the gate closed, when the silence wrapped itself around your senses. You are awake and then you are not. The memory of it never forms. By the time your thalamus finishes its quiet turning, you have already gone. And maybe that's the way it's meant to be. Sleep isn't something you chase. It's something you yield to, like a tide that rises over sand, like a mist that settles over a field. And when the world falls away, when sounds dull and your limbs disappear into warmth, you are left in a quieter place. A deeper place. A place where your body is no longer holding the reins. A place where your mind, in all its watchfulness, begins to let go of control. But even here, just beyond the gate, the mind is not whole. Because sleep is not a single state, it is many layers. And next, your brain will begin to divide its work, some parts resting, some parts keeping watch. You are not all asleep all at once. Not yet. Sleep is not one unified act. It does not sweep over the brain like a blanket. Instead, it arrives in pieces, slowly, quietly, and not all at once. Different regions of your brain yield at different times, and for a while, you live in a divided state. Part awake, part asleep. This in-between is where the mystery deepens. You are no longer fully in the world, but you are not yet fully gone. Your body lies still. Your senses are muted. But inside your skull, activity continues just differently in sections. Some areas go dark, like windows with curtains drawn. Others flicker and hum, holding on to wakefulness a little longer. It may sound strange, but it's true, sleep is not an on-off switch. It is a patchwork process unfolding in gradients. In this early phase of slumber, known as Stage 1 and Stage 2 sleep, your brain is in a liminal space. Think of it as the hallway between two rooms, one of consciousness, one of deep rest. You linger here briefly each night. It is a narrow place, but meaningful. It is where your mind begins to separate from itself. During this time, your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for reasoning, planning, and self-awareness, starts to dim. This is the seat of your inner voice, the sense of identity that narrates your day. As it quiets, your grasp on logic loosens. You no longer question how one thought leads to the next. Your mind becomes more fluid, less bound by rules. A cat turns into a cloud. A memory becomes a door. At the same time, your limbic system, which handles emotion and memory, remains more active. That's why the early fragments of sleep often feel strange, dreamlike, but raw. You're not inventing stories yet, just drifting through them. You feel more than think. You move without direction. And while all this is happening, another part of your brain stays partially awake. The brainstem, a primitive, vigilant structure at the base of your skull, remains alert. It monitors your body's basic functions, breathing, heartbeat, muscle tone. It watches over you like a lighthouse watching the sea. Even in your most vulnerable state, some part of you is always guarding. This strange division between awareness and absence is not unique to humans. Birds, dolphins, and some reptiles can literally sleep with half their brain awake. One hemisphere rests while the other keeps watch. This is called unihemispheric slow-wave sleep, and it allows them to stay safe in open water or among predators. In humans, we don't go quite that far. But something similar happens when you sleep in unfamiliar places. The first night in a hotel, for instance, often brings lighter sleep. Scientists have found that one hemisphere of the brain stays more active in unfamiliar settings, as if it's keeping vigil. A kind of night watch just in case. Even in your own bed, this dividing of the brain unfolds. Some parts begin to drift deeply. Others hold on just a little longer, making sure the body is safe, the environment still. This quiet dance between systems is why your descent into sleep is so gradual and why the line between sleeping and waking can feel so slippery. The result of all this is that you move through a tunnel of altered awareness without noticing the walls. You may twitch. You may hear a faint sound but not respond. You may think a thought but forget it instantly. These are signs of the mind separating into layers. This fragmentation also helps explain why you cannot remember the moment you fall asleep. Memory formation requires coordination between the hippocampus, your brain's memory librarian, and the cortex. But in this early phase of sleep, that connection weakens. The cortex is still partially awake, but the hippocampus is already beginning to power down. The systems no longer speak fluently. So even if you have a fleeting awareness, I think I'm falling asleep, the memory fades before it can be stored. It is like trying to write with invisible ink on water. This divided state isn't a flaw. It's a feature. It protects you, soothes you, prepares you. Because the body must be sure before it lets go. Your muscles, once ready to act, now begin to release. This is controlled by a small structure called the ventrolateral preoptic nucleus, VLPO. It sends signals that inhibit arousal systems, tipping the balance toward full sleep. But it doesn't force them all off at once, it coaxes them down. Gently, slowly, allowing time for the systems to negotiate the handoff. Even now, you may feel yourself drifting. Your breathing becomes more shallow. Your thoughts are less anchored. The thalamus, as you recall, has dimmed external input. The cortex is no longer mapping the world in precise detail. And yet, the brain still pulses with activity, just in unfamiliar rhythms. You are not fully here, and you are not fully elsewhere. This moment, fleeting, delicate, is the transition space where consciousness begins to slip. It is also where sleep spindles occur, brief bursts of brainwave activity that flicker like lightning across the cortex. These spindles may help protect you from waking too easily. They also seem to play a role in consolidating memories and stabilizing sleep. You could imagine them as the brain's soft lullaby to itself, a signal that all is well, that it's safe to drift deeper. Sleep, then, is not one door but many. You pass through them not in a straight line, but in spirals and steps. Each system checks in with the next. Each region lets go in its own time. And while your mind begins to soften its grip, your body listens. It listens for signals of safety. It listens for silence. And when all is quiet, when the systems have aligned, you are no longer divided. You are ready to fall. But even now, a part of you remains watchful. A piece of your mind still keeps a low flame lit, still listens at the edge of dreams. Because next comes something stranger still, the full fade of consciousness. What does it mean to lose awareness completely? What does it feel like to slip out of self without knowing? You do not remember letting go. But you do. Every night, without knowing how or when, your mind unhooks from the self it carried all day. You are no longer you in the same way. Not the thinker. Not the planner. Not the observer behind your eyes. Something begins to dissolve quietly, gently, and without permission. This is the fade of consciousness. It doesn't happen all at once, and it doesn't happen everywhere in your brain at the same time. But at some point during the descent into sleep, you cross a threshold. Before, you were dimly aware, thinking in fragments, sensing in shadows. After, you are gone. Not gone in body. Not even gone in brain. But gone in awareness. And this transition is one of the greatest mysteries of being alive. What is it to be conscious? We carry this question like a mirror in the dark. We know what it feels like to be aware, to be present, alert, reflective. But we do not know how or why awareness emerges from tissue and chemistry. We only know that it disappears. And every night it does. As you sink deeper into sleep, your brainwaves begin to slow. The quick pulses of theta waves give way to delta waves, large, slow, rhythmic oscillations that roll across your cortex like deep ocean tides. These delta waves mark the arrival of slow-wave sleep, a place of great quiet within the mind. But long before you reach that depth, the fading begins. The default mode network, a system of brain regions active during waking rest, when your mind is daydreaming, planning, remembering, begins to disengage. This is the backdrop of your inner voice, your silent monologue, the awareness of I am. And it dims bit by bit like stars slipping behind morning clouds. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for judgment, reasoning, and self-reflection, is among the first to step back. It is one of the last regions to fully develop in a human lifetime and one of the first to release control when sleep arrives. As it dims, your ability to question, to compare, to hold onto reality softens. That's why dreams don't always make sense. There is no inner critic, no fact-checker. The mind is floating now, untethered. And yet, your brain is still active. This is the paradox of sleep. The body may be still, the mind no longer aware, but deep within the folds of your brain, complex processes are underway. Neurons fire. Memory pathways adjust. Hormones pulse. Repair begins. It's not the lights going off. It's the theater emptying, the actors leaving quietly, the spotlight dimming to blue. Consciousness, so vivid by day, is not switched off in one clean motion. It is peeled away like silk from skin. It fades through transition. Scientists often define consciousness in two ways: wakefulness and awareness. Wakefulness is the state of being physiologically alert, eyes open, heart responsive. Awareness is the experience of thoughts, sensations, the self. In deep sleep, both are gone. In lighter stages, you may be partially awake but unaware, or aware but not fully awake. These overlapping conditions show just how fragile and fluid consciousness really is. No single structure controls it. Instead, a constellation of systems, cortical and subcortical, maintain this delicate state. When enough pieces disconnect, awareness fades. The self disappears. But no alarm sounds. No flag is raised. You simply vanish. There is a moment in meditation when the body is still and the mind grows quiet, where people sometimes glimpse the state. A slipping. A soft emptying. A feeling of watching oneself let go. It's not sleep, but it's close. It's a conscious step toward unconsciousness. In sleep, though, you never see the edge coming. That is part of the design. The thalamus, which you met before, helps shield the cortex from the senses. the VLPO sends inhibitory signals to quiet arousal. These systems don't just prepare you for sleep, they protect you from the memory of falling into it. If you remembered each fade, you would never truly rest. You would linger, trying to hold on. But you cannot hold on. And that is the beauty of it. You are carried. The fade of consciousness is not something you must do, it is something that is done to you. By your brain. By your biology. Like a tide pulling back, not because it chooses to, but because it must. And so, your identity, your memories, your awareness all begin to dissolve. Not lost. Just set aside. Folded into a deeper quiet. In this state, your brain becomes a kind of island. Isolated. Floating. Untouched by the sensory sea that bathed it all day. You don't feel the bed beneath you anymore. You don't notice the dark. You don't hear the sounds of the house settling. These things still exist, but your mind no longer places them into meaning. Instead, it turns inward. The posterior cortex, involved in integrating sensory experience, becomes less active. Without that integration, there's no unified field of perception. No you sitting in the room. No now. There is only drifting. Even language disappears. The inner narrator, so present by day, falls silent. There are no words in this place. Only impressions. And eventually, not even those. Your mind is not dead. It is not gone. It is simply somewhere else. It is beneath the surface. And yet, not all fades equally. Some systems remain dimly lit. The brainstem, which controls breathing and heartbeat, continues its ancient watch. The amygdala, seat of emotion, remains active in dreams. The cerebellum, involved in movement, still ticks along even though your body is paralyzed during deep sleep. This patchwork consciousness, this uneven dimming, is why sleep can feel like a place made of shadows. You are both absent and present. A part of you still listening. A part already gone. This fade is not failure. It is permission. You are being given back to something older than awareness. Something more essential. And just before you vanish entirely, just before the world goes dark, there is sometimes a single, final moment. A falling. A flicker. A sense of dropping through space. No sound. No fear. Just a sensation. And then, nothing. You are asleep. And from that place of stillness, deeper rhythms begin to rise. Brainwaves slowing further. Muscles fully relaxed. Systems changing hands. Sleep now takes over entirely. And what happens next no longer includes you, not the you that watches, or speaks, or records. You are now in the part of sleep that is deepest. But what happens to memory here? And why do some parts of your life remain, while others, like the moment of falling asleep, slip entirely away? Your memories live in silence. They do not announce themselves. They do not shine. They are like echoes in a forest, faint, layered, fading with distance. And at the heart of these echoes lives a small, curved structure in your brain, hidden deep beneath layers of cortex. It is called the hippocampus, from the Greek word for seahorse, because of its shape. It is your brain's archivist, your inner mapmaker. It takes the fragments of your day, what you saw, what you felt, what you did, and begins the quiet work of stitching them into memory. But the hippocampus, remarkable as it is, has one gentle flaw. It cannot record what it never sees. And as sleep begins, it begins to fall silent. This is why you can never quite remember the moment you fall asleep. Because to remember something, your brain must experience it with awareness. It must encode it and then store it. But awareness fades before that moment comes. And so your hippocampus, the scribe of your conscious life, goes unwritten for a brief span of time each night. You vanish and leave no trace. The hippocampus is always active when you're awake. It keeps time loosely, marking the order of things. It connects names to faces, places to feelings, footsteps to direction. It also plays a role in your working memory, the short-term mental desktop where your thoughts arrange themselves. But when you sleep, especially as you pass from light to deeper stages, the hippocampus begins to downshift. The flow of new information slows. The outer world no longer sends messages. The mind turns inward, and the hippocampus begins to change its role. Instead of recording, it begins replaying. In these early stages of non-REM sleep, it sends out quiet bursts of activity like tiny electrical ripples to other regions of the brain, particularly the neocortex. These ripples are called sharp wave ripples, and they are thought to be a kind of rehearsal. The hippocampus replays recent patterns of activity from the day, what you saw, learned, or experienced, and sends them to the cortex for long-term storage. Imagine it like a librarian reviewing the day's books before placing them on the shelves. But here's the paradox. Even while the hippocampus is replaying the past, it cannot record the present. So when you begin to drift, when you pass through that gentle space between waking and sleep, your hippocampus is already beginning its quiet task, and in doing so, it misses the very moment you're trying to remember. You cannot remember falling asleep because the system responsible for remembering has already begun to dream backwards. There's something oddly beautiful about that. Your mind, which tries so hard to hold on during the day, lets go at the exact moment it's most unreachable. And this isn't just a quirk, it's a deeply rooted biological rhythm. Over thousands of nights across your life, this process unfolds again and again. The hippocampus gradually shuts its door to new experience. And what you carry with you across the threshold into sleep is only what was already there, what had already passed. Sometimes you might remember thinking, I'm falling asleep. But that is not the moment itself, it is the moment before. The very edge of it. The final flicker before the scribe puts down their pen. Even more curiously, this process is selective. Your hippocampus doesn't record everything. It filters, prioritizes, chooses. What is novel, emotional, or repeated often is more likely to be retained. Neutral, familiar, or fleeting events like rolling over in bed or blinking at the ceiling are often discarded. So even if you were slightly aware during the descent into sleep, the moment may simply be deemed unworthy of storage. Like a soft breath in a crowded room, it goes unnoticed. There is another twist. During sleep, particularly in deep slow-wave stages, the hippocampus and neocortex enter into a quiet rhythm of exchange. Scientists believe this dialogue helps consolidate long-term memories, turning fragile new experiences into more permanent ones. The hippocampus may act as a temporary buffer during the day, holding events in place. But at night, it lets them go, passing them on to the cortex, where they can settle more deeply. This is why sleep is essential for memory. Without sleep, these handovers are disrupted. Memories remain fragile. They blur, break, or vanish. And yet again, during this vital process, you are absent. You are no longer the observer. You are the canvas on which it is happening, but you cannot see the painting take form. The mystery grows more tender here. How can something so essential, this nightly rewriting of your mind, be so invisible to you? The answer lies not only in structure, but in design. The hippocampus evolved to serve both your waking and sleeping selves. But it cannot serve them both at once. There are trade-offs in every system. And the trade-off here is this: to sleep deeply, to allow the hippocampus to replay and revise the day, you must stop adding new pages to the book. You must fall into forgetfulness for a time. That time is not lost. It is sacred. It is the silence in which your memories settle. And so the moment you fall asleep, the very one you wish you could remember is sacrificed to make room for everything else you need to remember. And perhaps that's the deeper message. For your brain to hold on to what matters, it must let go of how you got there. There is one more quiet truth. Not all memory vanishes when you sleep. Some fragments slip through. A sudden sound. A dream that startled you. The memory of reaching for a glass of water in the dark. These moments sometimes stay, not because the hippocampus was recording, but because the brain was briefly stirred back to wakefulness, brief enough to be remembered, but not long enough to stay. The memory of falling asleep, though? That one remains elusive. It is not forgotten. It is simply never made. And now, as you sink even deeper into the night, the hippocampus finishes its early work. It will continue to whisper in slow waves. It will continue to replay and revise. But its voice grows softer still. Other systems begin to take over. Your body slides into slow-wave sleep where the rhythms deepen. The lights of memory dim, and even the dream world has not yet begun to rise. You are moving into a darker sea now. A sea with no thoughts. No time. Just depth. There is a part of sleep so deep, so quiet, that even your dreams do not reach it. You do not float here. You sink. Like a pebble dropped into still water. Down past thought. Past awareness. Past the watching self. This is slow-wave sleep, also called deep sleep or non-REM stage 3. And it is the quietest place your mind can go. You don't remember arriving here. And you will not remember leaving. But your body remembers. And it needs this place like roots need dark soil. In this state, your brainwaves move in the slowest, widest patterns of the night. Delta waves, broad, heavy pulses roll through your cortex like thunderclouds. Where earlier stages of sleep shimmered with flickers and shifts, this phase is defined by stillness. Your body is utterly still now. Muscles limp, eyes unmoving beneath their lids. Breathing slow and even, as if the world has narrowed to nothing but air. Your heart rate drops, your blood pressure lowers, your temperature dips. It is the closest your waking body comes to hibernation. And inside, your brain enters a different kind of work. This is not the realm of dreams or visions. It is not the stage where stories unfold. Instead, this is the night's great reset. During slow-wave sleep, your brain does something extraordinary. It clears itself. Between your neurons lies a network of channels, a kind of plumbing system called the glymphatic system. And only during this deep sleep do these channels fully open. Cerebrospinal fluid flows through them, washing away metabolic waste, including beta-amyloid, a substance associated with Alzheimer's disease. You do not feel this cleaning. But it happens silently each night, like tides washing a quiet shore. Your cells repair themselves here. Your muscles rebuild. Your immune system strengthens. Growth hormone surges in this phase, aiding recovery and renewal. Wounds knit. Bones fortify. Systems calibrate. It is a time of restoration, not thought. A time of maintenance, not imagination. Even your memories, though set aside for now, benefit from this stillness. Earlier, during lighter stages of sleep, the hippocampus began its quiet transfer, sending echoes of experience into deeper parts of the brain. But for those impressions to settle, for them to become stable and long-lasting, the mind must fall into this depth. Without it, memory is like ink on damp paper, smudged, unstable, incomplete. But what makes slow-wave sleep feel so different is this. You are entirely unaware. This is not the fog of dreaming. It is the absence of self. Scientists describe slow-wave sleep as a state of disconnected consciousness. The brain is active but not conscious in the way you know it. You are no longer constructing a sense of self. You are no longer locating yourself in time or place. You are simply not there. This is why it feels like time disappears. You close your eyes, and then, later, they open. Hours may have passed, but in this place, time does not stretch or collapse. It simply vanishes. Some researchers believe this stage of sleep is essential for maintaining consciousness itself. That the brain, in order to stay functional and balanced during waking life, must regularly disconnect to recalibrate the delicate rhythms that give rise to thought, awareness, and identity. It's as if the theater must go dark between performances. Not for drama, but for cleaning, repairs, quiet. And yet, despite its silence, slow-wave sleep is protective. It shields you from external noise more deeply than any other stage. You are harder to wake. Your thalamus, the gatekeeper, closes its doors more firmly now. Only the most urgent of signals will stir you from this depth. And still, deep in your brainstem, one part of you remains on guard. You are never entirely defenseless. Somewhere, beneath the waves, a sentinel keeps watch. Sleepwalkers often rise from this very stage, not during dreams as people sometimes imagine, but during slow-wave sleep. Their brains are deeply asleep, but motor regions still stir. The body moves without consciousness. A hand may reach. A foot may step. But the self is not home. That, too, reveals the mystery of this depth. How much of you can go silent while some part still acts? This state raises ancient questions. What is awareness? Where is it housed? How can you be alive and yet not present? You pass through slow-wave sleep several times each night, mostly in the first half. As the night goes on, these periods shorten and dreaming stages take over. But this deep, early silence sets the foundation for all that follows. Without it, the dreams would fracture. The memories would scatter. The body would ache, unhealed. Children have more slow-wave sleep than adults. The young body grows and it needs the stillness. As we age, this stage becomes shorter, more fragile. But we never stop needing it. Even short naps rarely reach this depth. Only in the long, undisturbed arc of night can you fall this far. And when you do, your brain is not thinking. It is becoming. This is the sleep of dreamless dark. The sleep of pure restoration. And you, the self you know in daylight, are nowhere to be found. There is something sacred in that disappearance. In the surrender. In the letting go so complete that even thought is forgotten. It is not death. It is not dreaming. It is something quieter. Something more like the space between breaths. The still pause between waves. And when you rise from it, you do not remember. Because there was nothing to remember. Only silence. Only being. Only the echo of what it gave you: clarity, balance, restoration carried back into the light of day. But as this deepest stage softens, the brain does not stay in shadow. Soon, it begins to stir again. A flicker. A turn. You begin to rise, gently, through the layers. Your brain begins to let the world back in. Not all at once. First, it will open the window to your senses. It will let in sound and light and warmth. Slowly, carefully, cautiously. But before you fully wake, before your eyes flutter or your limbs stretch out, you begin to notice something else. The return of the outer world. Before your mind drifts, your body begins to disappear. Not all at once. Not with fanfare. Just quietly. Subtly. Gently. You stop feeling the bed beneath you, though you're still lying in it. You stop hearing the hum of the room, though it continues on. Light no longer presses against your eyelids. Touch no longer rings like bells along your skin. The world, once so vivid, begins to step back. And you, just as quietly, stop reaching for it. This is how sleep begins, not with thought, but with withdrawal. The senses fade before the self does. It is easy to think that sleep is something that happens in the brain alone. But your entire sensory system participates in this letting go. One by one, the gates of perception close. Sight is the first to dim. Even before sleep, when your eyes shut, your visual cortex starts to quiet. The brain no longer needs to interpret shapes, movement, light. Color dissolves. Edges blur. What was once sharp becomes formless, then nothing at all. Next comes sound. At first, you may still hear the world, soft noises, distant voices, maybe a rhythm from the street outside. But your thalamus, the gatekeeper of sensation, is already filtering more aggressively now. Fewer signals get through. Your brain begins to treat sounds not as meaning, but as background hum. Even loud sounds, unless urgent or unexpected, no longer startle. The world becomes muffled, as if someone wrapped it in wool and placed it far away. Touch lingers the longest. The sensation of your limbs on the sheets, the rise and fall of your breath, the weight of a blanket, all slowly soften. The somatosensory cortex, which maps your body in space, becomes less precise in sleep. The borders of your skin feel less defined. The line between inside and outside blurs. Eventually, even your body disappears from your awareness. You are no longer located. And though your body still lies there, breathing, warm, real, you are no longer tethered to it in quite the same way. Smell and taste, too, recede. They are rarely noticed in sleep unless stirred by something sharp or strange. But in the normal rhythm of slumber, they fade without notice. Just one more thread released. It's tempting to imagine this process like flipping switches, sight off, sound off, touch off. But it is not like that. It is more like turning down a dimmer, letting each sense fade into dusk. Each signal become mist. And while this withdrawal may sound like loss, it is not. It is a gift. A releasing. Because only when the outer world grows silent can the inner one emerge. This turning inward is what allows sleep to deepen. Without the constant demands of sight, sound, and sensation, your brain becomes freer to shift into its nighttime rhythm. To rest. To clean. To restore. The default mode network, the system involved in internal thought and self-referential processing, begins to hand over control. There is no need to monitor what's around you. The brain is preparing to dream, and it must first silence the noise of the waking world. The process is deeply rooted in your biology. Even animals withdraw before sleep. A cat will curl tightly, tucking limbs and tail. Birds draw in their wings. We all fold inward away from stimulation as if cradling the silence. And as your senses retreat, your sense of time begins to drift as well. Without light and sound to mark passing moments, time loses structure. Seconds stretch. Minutes collapse. You do not measure. You float. And though you may not realize it, this sensory withdrawal begins before full sleep even arrives. It's part of the hypnagogic state, that brief twilight zone between wakefulness and slumber. You may still be half aware, but the world is already slipping out of reach. Some people describe this moment as floating. Others say it feels like sinking. Both are right. Both describe the soft detachment from the senses. You are not dreaming yet, but you are no longer here either. There is a comfort in this vanishing. No need to answer. No need to respond. You are no longer responsible for the world's signals. You are being allowed to rest, allowed to forget, allowed to drift. And yet, for all the silence, a flicker remains. Because just before the world goes completely quiet, a final message may slip through. A single sound, a sudden motion, a faint voice at the edge of sleep. These interruptions, rare though they are, remind you that the gate is not fully shut, that the outer world still has a thread tied to you. That sleep, while deep, is not without its bridges. And sometimes, in this gentle silence, something even stranger happens. A sudden jerk of the body. A falling sensation. A dream before sleep has truly begun. But that is for the next chapter. This one belongs to the silence. To the hush that comes not from emptiness, but from the deliberate turning away. You don't notice the senses leaving. You only notice they are gone. Or rather, that they were once there. Just as sleep draws near. Just as your senses fade and your mind begins to drift, something sudden happens. A jolt, a twitch, a falling sensation, sharp and brief. You feel yourself slip, as if the bed dropped out from under you, and in a blink you are awake again. Heart quickened, muscles tight. For a moment you don't know why. This too is part of sleep. It's called a hypnic jerk. A small, involuntary muscle contraction that occurs as you begin to fall asleep. It is common, harmless, ancient, and oddly poetic. Because just as your mind is ready to vanish, your body remembers itself. Science doesn't fully understand why hypnic jerks happen, but they are thought to be linked to the fragile handoff between wakefulness and sleep. Your motor system begins to power down, muscles relax, reflexes ease, and then suddenly a misfire. A tiny signal escapes, a limb kicks, the body thinks it is falling, and snaps back. Some believe this is a remnant of our evolutionary past, a protective reflex, rooted in a time when sleeping in trees or high places meant danger if your muscles gave out too soon. Others think it's simply a discordant overlap, the nervous system transitioning at slightly different speeds across different parts of the body. Whatever its cause, the moment is brief, but it reveals something fascinating about this threshold. You don't always fall asleep cleanly. Sometimes the descent into sleep is smooth, like sliding into water without a ripple. But other times it's a stutter, a pause, a false start. And in that stutter, something else appears. Micro-dreams, not full dreams, not the vivid, emotional stories of REM sleep. These are flashes, glints, images that appear and vanish before they can be understood. A face you don't recognize, a room that doesn't exist, a single word, a falling star, a feeling with no shape. Micro-dreams happen in the hypnagogic state, that sliver of time between consciousness and unconsciousness. The world has faded, the senses are quiet, but the brain is still flickering, still reaching, and without the sharp filter of the waking mind, anything can surface. The visual cortex, still softly active, may generate strange images. The auditory cortex may offer phantom voices, snippets of songs, words you didn't think. These experiences are fleeting. They often last just seconds. You almost never remember them. But in that instant, your brain is both creating and forgetting at once, like drawing in sand with a tide already rising. Sometimes, these microdreams feel as though they startle you awake. But in truth, they were never fully formed to begin with. They are dreamlets, sparks, unfinished thoughts drifting through a mind that is still deciding whether to let go. There is a strange beauty to this, how your brain dances at the edge of sleep, testing, tasting, retreating. It's not indecision, it's transition, because unlike the neat categories of wake and sleep, this in-between is porous. In these moments, your awareness flickers. You may be aware of yourself lying still, and yet also feel a presence, a sensation, a place that shouldn't be there. This overlap can feel surreal, but it is normal. It is part of how the brain prepares for sleep. By loosening the boundaries between real and imagined, between outer and inner worlds. Think of it like the warm blur that comes when fog rolls across a field. What was once sharp becomes soft, edges vanish, and in that softness images form. Not real, not unreal, just present. You are still aware enough to notice, but not enough to hold on. Microdreams are not like the dreams of REM sleep. They are not woven from long storylines or emotional weight. They are lighter, more fragmented. Some researchers think they're the mind's final, idle run, before deeper processes begin. A kind of test flight, a rehearsal, and sometimes you wake before the play begins. That's what makes the hypnic jerk so memorable. Not because it happens often, but because it interrupts the silence so abruptly. You may fall. You may hear your name. You may see something odd, a bright flash, a sudden movement, just before you're jolted awake. And when you wake, you feel as though something important just escaped, something you almost saw, almost understood, but it's already gone. Because sleep, in its early stages, doesn't just change your brain state. It breaks continuity. It fractures time. You were lying still, then falling, then awake again. But in between, a blank, a flicker, an uncatchable thought. It's not a mistake. It's part of how your brain switches modes. Because crossing the threshold from wake to sleep is not an event. It's a process, one with room for stumbles. And those stumbles tell us something profound. You don't control sleep. You may invite it, welcome it, wait for it. But in the end, it arrives on its own terms. And even when it begins, it might pause. Linger. Test the space between here and there. That space is filled with little sparks, jerks, dreamlets, false starts, moments that don't quite belong to waking and don't quite belong to sleep. They exist only in transition, only at the edge, and then quiet again. The next time you fall, there may be no jolt, no image, no sound, just silence. And you won't notice that silence either, because this time you'll pass through it, and sleep will take you completely. Each night you fall asleep, and each morning you wake with no memory of how. Not because the moment slipped your mind, but because it was never placed there to begin with. This forgetting has a name: sleep's amnesia. It is not a flaw, not a failure of attention or memory. It is a feature of how the mind transitions from the brightness of awareness into the quiet, velvet dark of sleep. To remember something, the brain must first experience it with enough clarity, encode it, and then store it. This depends on several key processes: attention, consciousness, and the coordinated action of memory networks, especially the hippocampus and prefrontal cortex. But just before sleep, all three begin to dim. Your attention is blurred. Your sense of time unravels. Your brain shifts its focus inward, and your memory systems begin powering down. Not all at once, but enough that the handoff is missed. What's lost is not a memory. What's lost is the opportunity to remember. There was no solid imprint, no timestamp, no bridge between waking and sleep, just a soft, dissolving edge, and a self that no longer held the pen. This is why, when you try to recall the last thing you remember before sleep, you end up tracing a trail that vanishes, a blur, a half-thought, a turning over of the body, then nothing, only waking. It's not unlike anesthesia or fainting or the moment before a blackout. But sleep is gentler. Sleep asks for no alarm, no shock, no crisis, just surrender. And with that surrender comes the suspension of narrative. Your inner narrator, which guides your days. I am doing this. I feel that. I am here. Falls quiet in the minutes before sleep. Without this voice, there is no one to take note of your descent. No storyteller left awake to write the page. The prefrontal cortex, especially the dorsolateral part, which plays a central role in working memory and conscious thought, shows reduced activity even in early stages of non-REM sleep. It is among the first to dim its lights. At the same time, the hippocampus, your brain's memory librarian, begins to shift tasks. It stops recording and starts replaying. Its resources are reallocated. The filing cabinet closes. So when you ask yourself, why don't I remember falling asleep? You are really asking, why didn't my brain treat that moment as something to remember? And the answer is, because the conditions for memory were no longer there. It is not forgetting. It is never knowing. You were present until you weren't. This curious gap, this blank, has a name in neuroscience: the sleep onset period. It begins when wakefulness starts to wane and ends when stable sleep begins. During this period, awareness flickers, but memory formation drops sharply. Cognitive processing becomes nonlinear. The mind turns inward, and the outer world fades to background noise. In this window, thoughts become unanchored. They no longer follow strict logic. Time becomes loose. Sensory input is dulled, and the systems required to mark moments as significant are shutting down. Some researchers call this a functional disconnection. You are still processing, but not integrating. The brain is humming, but the pen is off the page. In studies where people are asked to press a button each time they feel themselves drifting off, they can sometimes do so up to the last second. But eventually the pressing stops, not because they chose to stop, but because the choosing part of the brain had stepped away. They do not remember the moment they stopped. They do not even know they did. This is not sleep yet. This is the fade, a space where you are still partially there, but the you who can form memory has already gone. The default mode network, which supports internal thought, memory retrieval, and the sense of self, also begins to fall out of sync. It no longer broadcasts the internal monologue. Instead, Its nodes fire in brief, uncoordinated bursts. Ideas arise without structure, images without explanation. It's a prelude to dreaming, but not dreaming yet. And without this coordination, the memory networks fail to bind experience into a coherent thread. Even if something happens, a thought, a microdream, a sensation, the memory of it cannot be encoded. It's like trying to write a letter in a room where the ink has already dried. And so, night after night, the moment you fall asleep is erased not by force, but by absence. You don't forget. You miss the chance to remember. There is one more layer. Even after you've fallen asleep, your brain continues to prevent memory formation for a time. This may be protective, a way to allow the body and mind to slip into vulnerability, without the cognitive tug of curiosity or fear. To remember falling asleep might anchor you in awareness. To forget is what allows you to float. The amnesia is not a flaw, it's a form of grace. And when you wake, even if it's only a moment later, the memory of having been asleep is just as elusive, unless something pulls you sharply back. A noise, a shift, a need. You may have no memory of how long you were gone. The sleep state itself resists storage. Only when your mind regains enough awareness to stitch events together does memory resume. But by then, the moment of crossing is long behind you. And so, night after night, you are carried into sleep, with no witness, no chronicler, no record, only your breath, only the heartbeat, only the letting go. You wake and the blank is there, but around it life continues. The bed, the morning, the sense of having rested. You piece together that sleep must have happened. But the descent? Gone. Always gone. And maybe that's the point. Because to fall asleep is not to remember. It is to surrender. And what you lose in story, you gain in stillness. So much has been revealed. The systems, the rhythms, the chemistry, the quiet turning of the thalamus, the fading of the senses, the slow retreat of the self. We followed your breath into the depths, watched memory flicker, then dim, traced the strange choreography of the brain as it lets go of wakefulness. And yet, something still escapes. Even with all we know, the moment itself, that precise sliver between I am awake and I am not, refuses to be caught. You can study the structures, map the waves, observe the muscles, the neurons, the pulses of the heart. But the instant you try to hold the moment of falling asleep, you are already on the other side. It is not a cliff. It is not a line. It is a vanishing. This is the mystery that remains. The transition into sleep is one of the most ordinary things we do. We do it hundreds of times a year, thousands of times across a life. And yet, it is one of the least accessible. No camera can follow you there. No scanner can show what it feels like to disappear. Because the you who feels, the you who records, is not present when it happens. This moment, then, is not just a scientific puzzle. It is a personal one. It asks something of you that no other moment does. To vanish without bearing witness. To surrender the very act of surrendering. To trust, not because you understand, but because you must. And that trust is ancient. Long before science. Long before language. Your ancestors surrendered each night in the same way. They did not know of neurons or neurotransmitters. They did not name the hippocampus or hypothalamus. But they knew the feeling of eyelids growing heavy, of the body yielding to warmth, of thoughts dissolving into shadows. And they too wondered, why do we fall and where do we go? We know more now, so much more. We know how the brain quiets. We know when the muscles still. We know how memory pulls back, and how the body repairs itself in the dark. But for all that we can measure, the experience still escapes, because consciousness does not mark its own exit. There is no closing note, no final word, only the gentle shuttering of windows until the light inside is gone. Some things science shows us in detail, others it only points to, softly, like a sign in the mist. Sleep's beginning is one of those places. There are theories, frameworks, carefully drawn models of brain activity and neural states. but none of them can show you the moment, because no one has ever stood there, fully aware, and stayed. Even when researchers use techniques to catch the mind mid-fade, pressing a button, reporting thoughts, tracking waves, what they capture are edges, hints, the final islands before the sea, but not the crossing itself. The crossing happens without you, and that is the quiet miracle, because every night, your brain walks you to the edge of self, then gently ushers you past it. It knows how. It has always known how. You don't need to remember the moment. You don't need to name it. You only need to trust it. And you do, night after night, without knowing when or how. You let go. You release your grip on the world, on thought, on self, on story, and fall into the softness. There is something deeply human in this, a kind of surrender we rarely speak about. To fall asleep is to admit, cannot hold on to everything, and that's okay. To forget the moment is to be held by it, to be carried, and that may be the most honest explanation we have, that we don't remember the moment we fall asleep, because we are not meant to, because remembering would mean holding on, and sleep is, above all, a practice in letting go of certainty, letting go of attention, letting go of the constant doing, and in return, sleep offers what nothing else can. A pause, a reset, a dark, fertile silence where the mind can be rebuilt, the body restored, and the self softened. There is a kind of wisdom in this design. The way your brain chooses healing over history, the way it trades knowing for becoming. So tonight, when your eyes grow heavy, when your breath begins to slow, remember this: you will not know the moment. You will not catch it, or feel it, or hold it in memory. It will arrive quietly, just as it always has. And you, the thinking, watching, wondering you, will vanish into it. Not lost, not erased, just asleep, just at peace. Because even if you do not remember, something deep within you does. Something ancient, something kind, something that every night leads you home.